they are the bad guys. Because we have to, in the story, we have to have bad guys as we are the bad guys for them, because journalists and scientists on their narrative, we are exaggerating. We are making extreme weather events something that is not natural and are blaming human activities for this. So for them, we are the bad guys. And for us, they are the bad guys.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, a podcast about the business of doing good. I'm Charlie Martin, your host and founder of TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability reports and communications. And our article this week is titled The Same Old Story, a heatwave of climate disinformation, published by the European Digital Media Observatory in 2026, which shows how climate disinformation spikes during extreme weather, weaponizes scientific complexity, and is now spilling over into attacks on the people and institutions trying to communicate the truth. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that today I've got a real expert in the room to unpack all of this. Sara Rego, an expert in sustainability communication and greenwashing risk. She's the founder of Mossy, managing director at BeTrue, and the host of her very own podcast, We Need to Act. Sara, it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Now, Sara, I'm going to give you my very initial reflection on this article when I read it for the first time. I felt so saddened and disillusioned when I read this. I just thought, my goodness, the bad actors, if you like, at play in the world and the impact it's having on climate misinformation and disinformation. It just really, really like bottomed me out, if I'm honest, and gave me a bit of a sense of fear and disillusionment to a certain extent. When you read the article, what did you feel about it?
Well, actually the same, because I deal with this every day, climate disinformation and misinformation. And it's something that really concerns me because for us to move towards a more sustainable world, because we envision this for the future as sustainability being a future state, we kind of imagine we need people to be on the same boat and to understand what is happening. And when disinformation is spreading and misinformation as well, because these are kind of different things, Disinformation is on purpose, doing it on purpose, and misinformation is not on purpose. It's just using lack of understanding of the subject. That also happens with greenwashing, as you probably know. There are companies doing greenwashing on purpose and others that are caught in the trap and do because they lack of knowledge.
Let's get into some of the detail of the article if I can, because I think, it was a hard read, I think, especially for anybody that kind of cares about, broadly sustainability. And I think the thing that really struck me, and I want to get your comment on it, was just thinking about like the actors that are involved in this in terms of like who benefits from climate misinformation. And essentially from what I read in the article, you're looking at the carbon economy, you're looking at the attention economy, and then you're looking at, essentially governments and lobbyists, etc. So, that is a fairly full picture, if you like, of bad actors that we're up against if we're thinking about, us versus them in terms of, spreading truth and spreading consensus on some of these issues.
So we have the bad guys, and this is so unfortunate to say because we shouldn't be talking about bad guys because we are on the same planet, and what is at stake is our own survival. And the survival of the human race. And we are, among other species, we are just one of the species living in here. But as you said, is something that is happening. And it has been happening since beginning of the 20th century. So this information ecosystem is extremely well organized. Actually, from what I read, It dates back to 1912. There was indication at that time that the connection between the coal consumption and climate change. And later we saw that in the 50s and 60s with the fossil fuel industry. They knew already that their activities, their products were having an impact in changing the climate. And at that time, they chose to omit the information, ignore it.
So the article talks about, essentially it's been a well-oiled, organized disinformation machine, a misinformation machine since the 60s. And yet you've just told us that it goes back essentially 50 years earlier when they knew about these problems. I want to ask you, obviously we're talking about this from the other side, but I think it's always interesting to try and get into the mindset of, the bad actors, if you like. What do you think when as you say, these are people who live on the planet. These are people that have got children and grandchildren. They've got reason, presumably, to want to see, a healthy, sustainable environment for their children, for generations to come. Why are they still peddling this in that knowledge?
Well, I think power speaks loudly. Power and money, because they think they can buy their exit out of this crisis with money. But if you look and see that without nature, we have nothing. They have no resources. There's no a stable planet. Without a stable planet, we won't be able to thrive as a species. So that's a really interesting question. Why would they do that? And also because human beings, they don't, it's really hard for us to think long term. Even when we talk, and we talk a lot in sustainability communication, we talk a lot about future generations. Even the concept of sustainable development is for future generations. That leaving a planet for future generations, or at least ensuring that they will have the same resources that we have right now to thrive. And it's really hard for us to think long term, even if when you ask someone to give me an idea what you are going to do in the next 5 years, they really it's really hard for them to tell you. So we have this agenda of 2030 and then the scenarios for 2050. And it's really hard for people to understand what is going to happen and to act now upon that. So probably they are just living the now, and what matters to them is just the power. And we see that not only in the business world, but in politics. Why are many governments around the world going far right?
I think this is you've touched upon something really interesting there. You know how people say that if you tell yourself a lie enough times, you can begin to actually believe your own lies. Like that is a psychological phenomenon, I believe. Again, don't quote me on it, but there's an understanding of that. Do you think there's almost a bit of that going on in the kind of climate denial, climate misinformation, disinformation space, i.e. that they've been peddling this narrative that no, this isn't down to human engagement. No, there's sort of explanations for why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think they told themselves these lies so much that they actually genuinely believe what they're saying now? Or do you think they're in the knowledge of knowing that, no, this is all rubbish. We know exactly where we're headed, but we're just choosing to maintain the status quo because of, to your point, the power and the money associated with doing so?
I think that might be happening, because if they are doing this from, let's go back to the 50s and 60s, to the fossil fuel industry, when they hire some scientists and they learn that their activities were changing the climate, and they decided to omit this information. And then afterwards, they started to invest on climate disinformation through think tanks and lobbying strategies and going into politics and so on and so forth. So they probably got caught in these lies and started believing it. Because, to be honest, climate science is really something complex. It's abstract. if we talk about climate science for ordinary people, it's really abstract to understand the amount of carbon that exists and that is trapped in the atmosphere, So if we talk about that, people won't understand. So I think you were right. They decided to lie. And probably nowadays, they just don't want to seek for the truth.
I think I was at a conference this week and I thought this was such an understatement, I should say. But somebody was doing a talk and they mentioned, I think they had a slide which said, we've got ourselves in a real pickle when it comes to sustainability communications. And essentially, we've created, the bad actors, if you like, have created such, and I think even the article alluded to, white noise. They've created so many deflection points, if you like, that it just sounds like it's just this mass of noise that no one can really unpick. And to your point about the complexity of the issues that are at play, for the layman person, it becomes almost overwhelming to engage with because you just think to yourself, oh my God, I really don't know what to make of all these different perspectives that are being showered down on me. I'm just going to become apathetic through sort of a lack of time, energy, and sort of consciousness that I can put into this. Just on that point, the article alludes to the relationship between the carbon economy and the attention economy and the role of social media. For those of our listeners and viewers who are sort of understanding climate disinformation for the first time, how do those two things relate to one another? How what's the mechanism at play between the two?
So, social media and technology in general, as artificial intelligence nowadays, it's amplifying climate disinformation. And, it's an algorithm. So what they want is to get people's attention. So even if they are lying, actually, the climate denialists and the climate disinformation is using the same formula, I would say, that we use in sustainability communication or climate communication, the same ingredients. Because we have to connect with people. We have to... at an emotional level, we have to be emotional, to talk, to touch them, and to speak about their own experiences. So the climate misinformation is using the same, and as you know, social media is just amplifying that. And why would they bother to social media and these big corporations like Facebook, why would they bother to tell people this is misinform you or this is deceiving you or anything? They just want profit.
Yeah. And again, and that's so revealing, the fact that, those companies in the attention economy, the very nature of the attention economy is that really the only metric that they care about is, have we got people engaged with this narrative? And the narrative of conflict and shaming and abusing and sensationalizing and pushing back on the scientific community because of perhaps the historical view of the elitism associated with the scientific community, which I think was alluded to in the article. That's what sells. That's what sells. And just on that point, and we're going to come on and talk about solutions, in a minute, but is there almost an argument to fight fire with fire? Or is that as my mother would always say, two wrongs don't make a right, and you shouldn't play that game?
Well, I think your mother is right.
Shout out to Heather Fairburn, by the way.
Yeah. I think she's right, because actually in sustainability communication, a good practice is to often meet people where they are. Is not going against them, but first listening to them and understand and recognize where they are, because they have an experience, they deny climate because of some reason, either because they lack of understanding, either because something has happened to them before, or so we just first have to recognize that. And I spoke a while ago with George Marshall. He is the author of the book, Why We Ignore Climate Change. And he was telling me that once he had to, I think, work with the fossil fuel industry and to speak with the people working there. And the first thing he said to them was, I recognize the work you have done, because they are the bad guys. Because we have to, in the story, we have to have bad guys as we are the bad guys for them, because journalists and scientists on their narrative, we are exaggerating. We are making extreme weather events something that is not natural and are blaming human activities for this. So for them, we are the bad guys, and for us, they are the bad guys. So he was telling me that at that interview, he recognized those people, those workers, the fossil fuel industry, and say, thank you for the work you have been doing. I know this is a really dirty working, and for the work you have been doing, we have the conditions we have nowadays. Because we are where we are in terms of development because we use fossil fuel. So at some point, and it's
the recognition.
It is the recognition. It's like you have to make them feel visible. That the work. And after they were engaged emotionally, you start talking about climate change and the impacts. We also have to recognize this is we have to talk about that. The biggest problem we have nowadays is consumption, the level of consumption. It's not whether we use fossil fuels, but it's the amount of fossil fuels we have been using for things that we don't actually need. So there are some theories, even economic theories, that like degrowth, for instance, that say that we should go back to levels of consumption of the 50s and 60s and allow other countries to have the same resources as we had in the past for developing nations to speed up their development.
A rebalancing of the whole kind of economic sort of ecosystem, if you like. I think it's a brilliant suggestion. The article alludes to the fact that essentially when we have extreme weather events, we get more climate disinformation. Basically, there's more of an explanation that comes for, oh, yeah, we've had wildfires here, we've had floods there, whatever. But don't worry, that's all, that's nothing to do with human beings. And here's all the kind of disinformation that we're sharing in order to back up that narrative. Like, does that therefore mean that we're going to see more and more climate disinformation as these weather events keep occurring on a more regular basis?
Yeah, I think we will. But I'm also hopeful that people start to understand and that we use this force against us to mobilize us, to create tools, to inform people. I think in the future they will probably run out of arguments unless they create a whole new story around this due to and they can do that because, as I said before, this is really complex. And if we don't inform people otherwise, they will believe what they are given.
Sarah, I think we've done a decent job of framing some of the problems at play. I think for anyone that wants to check out the article in full and get a full sort of read down on climate disinformation, we'll obviously provide a link so you guys can go and check it out. But I want to kind of switch focus now, and I want to start thinking positively about some of the solutions to some of these issues. And I think I want to start here. The article alludes to the fact that one of the things that I think I can't remember the organizations involved, but there's a big push or there's a scheme in place to help educate journalists in climate and to be able to identify, acknowledge, and obviously, therefore, not sort of endorse climate disinformation. Just touch upon, again, you might remember the organizations that are involved in that. Just touch upon that sort of scheme and what you think the impact of that could be.
You really highlighted a really extremely important subject, which is education, and it is often used also. Climate denialists, and we have also seen that in far-right governments, they they stop investing in education. That's the way of controlling people. Even the social media that we mentioned before, and the attention economy, we are not educating people in general. Well, our attention span is decreasing, with the shorter videos every day, new consumption. The algorithm is changing every day. We have to change the way to cut people's attention. But our attention span, it's really hard for us to focus on something. So that's why it's really easy to spread lies, because people don't go deeper into the subject to really understand what is happening. They just believe, oh, someone told me. And especially if it's influencers on internet, on other people, because even from politics, there's been a decrease in terms of trust and politics and scientists, as you mentioned. So sustainability and climate change, I would say, is perceived differently according to your own reality. So what sustainability for me in a developed country is different from what is sustainability for someone in a developing nation. So if you go to them and talk to them about climate change when they lack food to eat, they won't understand, But what education needs to do is to think of this in an interconnected way, not like we have been studying disciplines and topics like separately. So you have health, you have science, maths, etc. But you have to connect everything and go back to nature, to where we developed ourselves, to where we evolved as a species 99.9% of the time on Earth. But what is missing here is the link between the global and the local. And that people have to go and look for local initiatives. So the first thing they should probably do is to look in the area where they are living, what they are doing for the climate. First, because they can create a community. And because when you try to do that yourself, isolated, you feel overwhelmed. Like, I'm doing it alone. I'm the only one thinking about this. Why is nobody else thinking about this? So if you go to a community and you find like-minded people, you will feel more engaged, empowered to do something, because you will see what others are doing. And you will feel connected to the reality, because one of the things that is also overwhelming, and sometimes it is even demotivating, is that you don't see the results, the impact of your actions. So if you do it locally, you will see the impact in other people.
I want to conclude now by getting a bit magical with you. And, nothing is off the table here, but I'm going to hand you a magic wand and I'm going to ask you if you could do anything to address the issues that we talked about today, anything magical that you could just overnight change, what would it be?
Probably empowering the consumer, because at our level as citizens, consumers, I think I would give people the ability to see the reality of the world we are living in the way that they would recognize how many of the things that we buy every day are unnecessary, useless, and how companies deceive and mislead us through advertising and make us believe that you need something that will help you do something to solve a problem that they have created, and I recently, there was an article, a scientific article published about something, some of my research regarding branded documentaries. And we analyzed the Sheetopocene from Patagonia. And they actually are right. And we could discuss if they are advertising or no, if it is, if they are doing that for the good. No, but in terms of the Sheetopocene, the concept, I really like it, and I would just make people realize the sheet we produce every day and how it is impacting, because we have this like long supply chains and people don't know where the product comes from. They have no idea how that single buy is impacting someone in the other side of the world and ripple effect it has. So I think that would be.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was really a great pleasure to talk to you.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to Sara Rego for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability reports and communications. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.